to talk about compliance acceleration and resources that we have here at AWS that can help you get through the process. I'm Ted Steffen. I'm the head of Federal Compliance Acceleration. Fancy title for a guy that just helps drive the priority of services that we take through FedRAMP from an AWS perspective. Prior to this, I helped create the ATO on AWS program. That program connects partners with partners that accelerate them through the FedRAMP process. And I was the DoD compliance architect here prior to that, taking the initial set of GovCloud services through FedRAMP and DoD IL4 and 5.
And I'm Travis Goldbach. I sit within our government regions go-to-market team. I focus mainly around CMMC, DFARS, NIST compliance requirements, which our customers have, and ultimately with CMMC now and the FedRAMP equivalency, really excited to show everyone around the solutions and services that we have.
So, and I apologize, I was hoping for a monitor over there that I could see that I wouldn't have to turn, but we got a short little agenda here. We got some really good resources to talk about. We're gonna touch on what compliance is at AWS. We're gonna touch on the regions and what compliance is available in those regions. The services in scope where you can go to find what AWS services are authorized for use. As well as AWS Artifact, which has some documentation for you to refer to. And then a couple of other things, the Landing Zone Accelerator, and then I mentioned earlier the ATO on AWS program.
Yeah, and if there's three things that we want you to get out of this is, number one, how our customers are utilizing AWS and the resources to find. Number two, who to talk to if you guys have questions. That's Ted and myself. And then, I guess, what customers are doing, and as well as the resources. That would be three. So.
All right, so compliance. When we think about compliance in our US-based regions here at AWS, you can see we've got a handful of badges hung up there. All of our US-based regions have a number of services that are authorized in the FedRAMP space. Our commercial regions have services authorized at FedRAMP Moderate, whereas GovCloud has them authorized up to FedRAMP High. DoD Impact Level 2 in our commercial regions, and up to DoD Impact Level 5 in GovCloud. A handful of other certifications that we have there, including, within the FedRAMP space, FIPS is a big important one, but we do cover a handful of other standards as well.
And this is what those regions look like. On the far left-hand side, you can see our commercial US East-West region, as Ted was saying, meets that FedRAMP Moderate as well as DoD SRG Impact Level 2. Then we were talking with our customers, in particularly in the public sector, and they wanted to understand how to architect some of the most stringent workloads. So in 2012, we created GovCloud, which is an isolated region and services. And just beyond that, you have our secret and top secret region. But all of these regions are going to be isolated from one another. You will have to work from one to the other. You can't just start in the top secret region. You have to start in the commercial and work your way through. Sean Asfeld, he's going to be speaking next around GovCloud and talking a little bit more about how to get started with that.
Yeah, one of the things to call out in regards to GovCloud, it's a separate identity domain from our commercial regions. So when you create your commercial account, you can bounce around to any region throughout the globe, except to the GovCloud regions. You have to create another account there to get into it, because we maintain isolation there. We run it with US citizens on US soil. So.
Yep, and there's separate identity and access management stacks, and Sean will go through some of the requirements to gaining access. There's three main requirements. The root account holder must be a US citizen. Your organization must be within the US soil. And we're going to go ahead and do a double check with the State Department to ensure that you can handle export control data.
So continuous monitoring, from an AWS perspective, we go through the FedRAMP process and the DoD process and get our PA from the DoD, a PATO from the JAB. But then, we roll into continuous monitoring. And we do all of our ConMon reporting to the JAB. It's kind of an agreement or arrangement that we have with the DoD that allows us to do that without having to also report to them. Initially, when we first got our regions authorized, Health and Human Services held the ATOs to those. And so we would have to go over every month to Health and Human Services and present our ConMon report. as well as NASA and a handful of other agencies that wanted to review our CON1 reports as well. But moving forward and moving our authorizations to the JAB allows us to do that CON1 reporting to a single entity, simplifying it for us and also for all of our customers. They've got one place to go to get that information.
So when customers come to us and they want to understand what services are authorized at either FedRAMP Moderate or FedRAMP High, one of the first places we like to point them to is the FedRAMP Marketplace. FedRAMP Marketplace is going to provide the authorizations, the reuse of those authorizations, as well as a list of all the services that have gone through those authorizations from FedRAMP Moderate to FedRAMP High. So within the commercial East-West, it's the FedRAMP Moderate. Within the GovCloud, it's the FedRAMP High. And it will showcase that, and it will actually be one of the first places our customers like to start because they can see that already listed on the FedRAMP Marketplace.
Yeah, so looking at trying to find AWS services that are authorized in the FedRAMP Marketplace, up until the most recent change with the FedRAMP Marketplace, it was kind of cumbersome. It was just a long box of text. So we created what we call our AWS services and scope page, and that initial page represented on the left there will take is the landing page, and below that, the second box to the right is just an example of the list of frameworks that we authorize against. So you land on that first page, and then if you're interested in DoD CCSRG, you can click on that link. If you're interested in FedRAMP, you can click on that link, and from there you get to this page, and this is the FedRAMP page, and you'll see on the left side a list of all of the services that we either have an authorization for or we're working on an authorization for. We list the CLI for that, as well as the SDK, not the CLI. But then there's two other columns. The first column is US East-West. That's our commercial regions, US-based commercial regions. And then the next column is going to be GovCloud. And so it's pretty clear that, if there's a checkbox there, that it's authorized in that region. And then we have a handful of services that we worked with the PMO and the JAB to scope out of having to be authorized. But we want to list them there so our customers know they can use them. Things like billing and the console, those are some examples of services that don't need to be authorized.
We'll talk about one of those other services called AWS Artifact too here in a minute. And then after the customers decide on which services will meet their compliance requirements, they go ahead and look and see if that service is within a specific region. So is it within the commercial West region? Is it within the commercial East-West region? Or is it in GovCloud, East or West? And they'll go to the services and region page and be able to identify to ensure that those services are within the region that they need them. If those services aren't within a specific region, we have teams that I work with to help ensure that customers are getting the services that they need in those regions in the time they need them.
Yeah, we're a real data-driven organization, so we're not going to launch a service in, say, GovCloud, for example, unless we really have enough customer demand for that. And typically when a service launches in GovCloud, it's going to be in our West region first. That was our first region. So they'll land there first, and then based upon customer demand, again, we'll work to get them in our East region. We're working with our service teams to get a lot more parity between all of the regions, so it's easier for you guys. But today, that's kind of why you'll see that bit of discrepancy between the commercial regions and the GovCloud regions.
Yeah, because we also identify that not all of our services are going to be needed to be used by our federal customers. So
in order to help customers and partners, to build a compliant environment in the cloud is a pretty complex task. So we've created what we call the Landing Zone Accelerator. And basically what this is it's a reference architecture that we put out and we maintain. It's a multi-account structure to kind of help reduce the blast radius if there's an issue anywhere. And we continue to update and maintain this. And this is kind of the foundation for a lot of the other compliance frameworks that we overlay on top of the Landing Zone Accelerator. So, if you're greenfield and you're building from the ground up, it's a great place to start. But since we provide this, all of the documentation is available, as well as all of the source codes in a GitHub repo. So you can go and pull that down. And if you say, hey, I like how this little component of this landing zone accelerator architecture is set up, you can prune that out and use it in your own architecture without having to create it all yourself.
And this is a solution that you can build in days and weeks, not months and years. If you have the right team. If you don't have the right team, we have plenty of partners that have an understanding of how to build out this environment. And we also have support that's available that knows this environment inside and out as well.
Yep. So documentation, I kind of touched on this a little bit. So all of the documentation for the landing zone accelerator is on there. All of the source code is available. All of the documentation on how it's built, it's all available to you to make it easier for particularly greenfield customers, but some of you that already have existing architectures, you can leverage part of it as well.
And from a documentation perspective, we have the NIST 800-171 and CMMC customer package that provides in line with what are the controls of CMMC, how is it mapped from NIST 800-171 to NIST 853 to the CMMC domains. It provides guidance around what's AWS's operational responsibility when utilizing this solution, and then what's the customer responsibility, and can it be inherited from AWS? Is it fully a customer responsibility, or is it a partial responsibility where we're sharing that? And then the other document there is the FedRAMP white paper that one of our partners went in and did a look at the landing zone accelerator and put together a white paper on how it meets FedRAMP high compliance. But we do have customers utilizing this solution in our commercial region as well.
So let's talk about some of the documentation that we have available. We have a service in the AWS console called Artifact. Within Artifact, there's a ton of different reports, as well as agreements. Agreements, think of like HIPAA BAAs or business associated addendums. But within the reports section, go ahead and select, there we go. We have what we call the FedRAMP customer package. In the FedRAMP customer package, when you select that and download it, you're gonna pull it up and look at it, and it's gonna initially show up as a 2-page PDF, and you're gonna say, well, Ted sent me to this document, and this document doesn't help me at all. There's no information in it. But embedded within that document are the 3 different attachments. The most important one is going to be the CIS and CRM for FedRAMP, the Control Implementation Summary and Customer Responsibility Matrix. So the CIS basically is the control status from an AWS perspective, where we've landed on the implementation status of all of the controls. But the CRM goes into more detail as far as what are your responsibilities for meeting compliance, and what you need to do to address particular controls. Within that, under the CRM, the second column in there is inheritance status. And so we've gone through and indicated for those systems that are fully running within AWS, which controls you can completely inherit from us. So think of the maintenance family of controls. We're gonna make sure that all of the servers in the data centers are being maintained and properly cared for. The media protection set of controls. We're gonna make sure that all media entering and leaving the data center is properly accounted for and destroyed as appropriate. And then physical and environmental. We're gonna make sure that the emergency lighting is in place, backup generators are working, humidity sensors are working, visitor logs are in place. So we're gonna take care of all of that for you. There's also a handful of other controls in the AC control family, like AC18, the wireless access points in the data center. We're going to take care of that for you, as well as some contingency planning controls for like diverse telecommunications, diverse power, those types of things in the data centers. We're going to take care of that for you. So the CRM will really help you when you're working on your documentation for the systems that you're building.
And the CRM is available for both commercial east-west and GovCloud, and it comes in the same package. we're just showcasing here the FedRAMP High one for GovCloud.
There's a separate tab on the bottom of the spreadsheet for the CIS for our commercial regions and the CRM for GovCloud and commercial regions.
So here's the shared responsibility model. If you're not within the cloud, this is going to be all of your responsibility. But from an AWS perspective, we're taking care of the infrastructure, the availability zones, the edge locations. That's going to include the compute, storage, database, and networking. And then it really depends on the services. So this is infrastructure as a service. And if you get to the other services that we have available, like container services and abstracted services, there's really going to be more responsibility on AWS.
Yeah, as Travis is pointing out, as you move up that stack, we're going to be taking care of more things for you. If you're using EC2, you got to do all your own patching. We'll take care of the infrastructure, but any hosts that you're running on top, you've got to take care of that yourself. But if you're moving into some of the container services, specifically ones like Fargate, we're going to be doing much more of that for you on your behalf, alleviating some of that burden for you.
And if you were maybe in some of the other sessions, I think at one point they did talk about the CCGs. So we understood that the FedRAMP package and the landing zone accelerator, the NIST 800-171 customer responsibility matrix wasn't enough for our clients. They really wanted to understand more on a service by service and get that guidance. So our customer compliance guides map to over 100 different services. There's over 30 different security topics that you can dive into. We'll show an example of that. And then it provides the practice guidance, and it's mapped now to 16 different compliance frameworks. So what we have showcased here is a customer compliance guide. As you can see, I believe we have Amazon Bedrock on the left-hand side and different security topics. So I think there's data storage, encryption that's listed there. And you can filter through each one of these. So you can filter to a specific service or services that you're utilizing, specific security topics. And then in the next area is the control ID, what control ID that will map to from that security topic perspective. And you can manipulate that related control with the far right. It actually says CMMC there, but that's where you can also add in NIST 800-171, NIST 853, NERC CIP, SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 27001, and those 16 other frameworks that are available. That'll ultimately just change the control ID, but the customer guidance is going to stay the same and the services are going to stay the same. And there's also links to our user guides that are in there as well for additional information.
Yeah, basically when I'm working with customers and partners on this particular document, I have them drill in on what compliance framework they're interested in first. And then from there, select the service they're interested in. And then that'll map them to all of the relevant controls. Because again, remember, we're going to take care of some of those controls for you. So these are only the controls that you'll need to worry about for that particular service.
Now this customer compliance guides, it's available in Artifact. It's also available on the Global Security and Compliance homepage for customers to download. And I don't know if we said it before, but AWS Artifact is for free for our customers to download. No cost associated with those.
Yep. So the ATO and AWS program, this is a program that prior to the role I'm in now, I helped create. And the whole goal behind this is to help accelerate folks through initially it was the FedRAMP process. So we wrote our, in Amazon fashion, we wrote our 6-pager, pitched it all the way up through our VP, and finally got approval to go do a proof of concept. So we took one of our partner companies through the process from GovCloud account creation, using a system integrator partner to build out that general support system with all of those compliance-related requirements, and then integrated the SaaS into that, created all of the required FedRAMP documentation, and then brought in a 3PAO to do the assessment. And we did all of that work from beginning to end in 90 days, proving that, there is a faster path to this. And the system integrators that we work with, have now even refined that further, and I believe that window is shrunken down by a number of weeks. If you have a need to get through the process quickly, we have partners that really can help accelerate you there. But the program is really designed at, like I said, initially FedRAMP and DoD SRG. They've expanded that program out now, and they've got compliance frameworks all throughout the globe that they support, as well as partners, system integrator and compliance partners all over the world that have the ability, if you're talking about IRAP or MCTS or CCCS or, whatever the case may be, there are partners that we work with all around the globe that can help accelerate you through this.
And I'm starting to see a lot of traction with the defense industrial base because CMMC is looking at the DFAR 7012, which says if you're utilizing a cloud service provider, ensure they meet the FedRAMP moderate equivalency. Everyone might have seen the equivalency memo that came out. So they really need to start looking at how they can meet the FedRAMP equivalency to that memo that has come out. So this is a faster way for them to do it.
Questions for us?
Yep. Equivalence. Yeah. Yep. So CMMC is looking at the DFAR 7012, which is DFARS 252.204.7012. And it says within the top part, the DIB member must implement the NIST 800-171 special publication controls, a set of 110 controls. There's additions to that depending on the specific level that you'd be going for. But underneath it, it says, ensure if you're utilizing a cloud service provider, ensure they meet the FedRAMP moderate equivalency. There wasn't a memo that basically was out there that went through what is equivalency. That's now come out in January of this year. There's been one cloud service provider that's met the equivalency memo. It's actually a partner of AWS, provides email encryption and file sharing. And now there's a big push for all the other cloud service providers to need to meet that requirement. So they're looking at ways that they can really be helped.
Basically, and the memo came from Mr. McEwen. It expanded out that said if, in order to meet FedRAMP moderate equivalence, you've actually got to hire a 3PAO and go through that FedRAMP moderate assessment. Of course, there's no sponsor, there's no way to adjudicate that to an ATO, but you still have to go through that assessment process. And there can be 0 3PAO related findings in that assessment. So it's a pretty high bar.
So it's an interesting point because, well, I won't get into what we do necessarily, but within CMMC, obviously there's a lot of vagueness to that still. But nonetheless, how does the DIB leverage, I guess they have, as you say, equivalency, you going through a FedRAMP process, you can, so you've got to utilize a 3PAO to demonstrate that you could meet FedRAMP moderate if you were in a FedRAMP moderate environment, but in this case, just meeting the equivalency. So everybody's going to have to kind of move what may have been an enterprise environment that they've been utilizing to support CMMC customers or the DIB into some type of secure GovCloud environment, right? Is that what I'm understanding now?
So only for cloud services that they're using.
Right.
So for example, if they're using one of our cloud services, I'll use Workmail for an example. We've not taken Workmail through the FedRAMP authorization process. There's not a lot of governmental demand for another email solution. So we've not taken FedRAMP or Workmail through the FedRAMP process. But we have members of the DIB that want to use Workmail. So if we're going to continue down that process and we get enough demand, then we'll take it through the assessment process, but it won't adjudicate to a JAB ATO.
Well, sorry for clarification. So this is essentially going to mean that somebody that supports both enterprise, government, and now the DIB is going to have a third environment.
Not necessarily.
Okay, that's what I'm missing. Sorry.
Yeah. So and the way I kind of envision this is we'll have your enterprise environments where all of your HR systems, many organizations are global. They've got people supporting the systems all over the country, all over the world. They'll have to build out a separate enclave where they can handle that FCI and CUI or government unclassified data that they can then control and manage outside of the corporate systems because, like we at AWS, we've got people all over the globe that manage our email solutions. So if we're going to be sending and receiving CUI with email, we've got to have a system that can be managed by, US persons.
So, nice to actually find you in person. But question, so you guys kind of have the pulse of where FedRAMP is. You see what OMB is doing. As one of the major IaaS providers, what would you like to see OMB do kind of on the reinvention and kind of where they're going? What's on your dream list if OMB would, direct GSA and FedRAMP PMO to do this would really help, I'm assuming you to enable all these SaaS companies to really flourish, because that's, I think, at the heart of what your mission is.
Yeah, so one of the things, and speaking for me, I really think the biggest problem that we have in the FedRAMP program is a lack of funding in the federal government. When we take a system through, or you take a system through, it's a lot of labor. It takes a lot of effort to go through and review all that security documentation. And there just isn't enough staff, whether it's the DoD, whether it's GSA, whether it's HHS, wherever it may be. There's not enough security and compliance people out there to get through all of the packages that get presented to them. And that's why it can take as long as it does. That example I gave you about the 90 days earlier, it still took 8.5 months to get the ATO after we submitted it. And we didn't have to make any material changes to the environment. So it's the lack of staffing, I think, that from the government side that pushes things through quicker. Now, they did make a good change a number of years ago when they implemented the LI SaaS, the lightweight SaaS. But unfortunately, that's a very small niche market, and there's not a lot of organizations that fit into that. It would have been a great accelerator. I'm not seeing a lot of people go through it anymore.
So as you're thinking about this, I guess my question for you all is, and I've used Artifact as a great platform, and I agree with you that operationally, I think a lot of organizations are going to have their delivery domains kind of in those secure enclaves, and that's how we're going to approach it. But my question to you is, as we're talking about, what role does CISA and NSA play in helping to accelerate these things? Because I feel like, they have a mandate for shared services. And it feels like there's an opportunity there to help us all scale faster when we talk about how we do these things, especially for delivery partners, for SaaS providers, right? It feels like there's a role for them to play that they're not currently filling. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I know we had some of the FedRAMP folks that were supposed to be speaking here earlier. I think that would be a better question for them. As far as what CISA or any of the organizations could do, I think it still gets back to funding. I think that in order to really speed organizations through, there's got to be either better processes in place, and I know Dr. Agora's here, and she's going to talk about OSCAL. There's got to be better processes in place. Compliance is a hugely manual process, and we've got to be able to speed that up. We've got to automate where we can. And move away from some of these, spreadsheets and Word documents that we work on.